Hello, this is going to be the second summary video for my web development course. If you're on the course, you already know what these videos are about. If you're not, basically what I'm doing is I'm running a course at Swansea University. My name is Dr. Sean Walton, and for every lecture I'm going to do a summary video that goes over probably the kind of practical elements from that lecture. So for example, this first one, the lecture was a brief introduction to HTML and CSS. So I'm going to do a relatively quick introduction to a few of the basics in HTML and CSS. It's that simple. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this. So these videos might be useful to you even if you're not on the course. If you're on the course, I might not do a video for every single lecture because some of the lectures are more theory focused, and that's fine in a lecture, whereas I want these to be a bit more practical, me doing something and you following me. So, the thing I'm using here is called CodePen.io, which is a really nice real-time editor for HTML and CSS. What this is modeling is having a folder on your server with a HTML file which references or has some kind of link to this CSS file as its style. So, sorry if I have to keep drinking, I've got a bit of a sore throat, but I really want to get these videos done. So HTML is hypertext markup language. It's the markup that a browser interprets and then renders on screen. It is made up of elements. So for example, an element might be a header, or the heading. I'm going to say H1 means heading 1. I'm going to be copying stuff from this Wikipedia page, like shamelessly, but you know, I pay my donations to Wikipedia every year, so I figure I'm allowed to use it. Okay, so H1 gives us a heading. So we've got this text here we'd call the inner HTML of this element. And I open the element or open the tag like this and close it like this. The next most simple one probably is paragraph. So if we want a paragraph of text, it would go in here. So let's just copy this. There's lots of weird characters. I don't know what's going to happen there. How's that going to... Yeah, no, that worked. Okay, so we've got a paragraph and we've got a heading. So we're starting to build a page up. Now, what if we wanted a link, which is a very important part of HTML? Well, that we would do href equals, I'm just going to close this around here. Notice here we have this inner HTML has got kind of two elements. It's inside two elements, so it's both a heading and it's a link. And this is our first HTML attribute, which is how we can control the behavior of the elements. So in this case, href refers to the link we want. So let's say we want to link to the Wikipedia page. We do that. And if you look in the bottom left of Chrome, you can see it says that that's the link it's going to go direct to. Now with links, we actually have another attribute we can use called target. If I do target equals blank, then what that will do, if I click this link, it opens it in a new tab or a new window. And with a lot of these things, like you'll need to, I wouldn't expect you to have to memorize tags and attributes, but to know what's possible and where to find the information to do it. And the answer to that is pretty much Google. So, I mean, for example, if we go to Google or if we type in HTML link, and then W3 Schools is really, really good, and it'll have all the details. For example, here are the different attributes that we could set target to and what they do. So that's quite useful. I think that's one of the great things about this stuff is that there's so much information out there. It's really, really good. So there you go. So that's a link. We've got heading. We've got a paragraph. Something else we might want is we might want an image. So let's go. I'm going to right click on this, copy image address. The image is like this: img source equals the URL of the image, and then I'm going to close this tag. So you should always, even something like an image which doesn't have there's no inner HTML, so it doesn't have a second tag to close it. So like this one, we start the link here and we close it here, and then you've got this inner HTML. We don't have that with an image, but we're still going to close it to do it properly. So the image you can see is appearing there. Now there are a number of important attributes for images. One of them is the alt text. So this is, we're going to say T-Rex skeleton. I hope I spelled skeleton right. I totally didn't. Okay. Right, so the alt text there is T-Rex skeleton. This is important for a few reasons. Firstly, if you have a user who's blind, there is software that will read out a web page, and it will read out this alt text. Right. The second thing, if I put a T here, then it's a broken link. So I've broken this link deliberately, and it says there T-Rex skeleton. So you know what was meant to load. Now something else that's important. I want to show you something that you've probably seen happen on a website. Well, I see it happen a lot. So let's just put in another paragraph here. This might be hard to illustrate because I'll need like, I don't know what's happening. This has kind of crashed. Let's try it. There we go. Let's just close it there. Okay, so I've got a second paragraph. Imagine that I had a link somewhere here, like at the 12.3 meters. Let's say, for example, I don't know. Or no, this, okay, on Wikipedia, if you look, these numbers are links. So say it's this link here. And I've put my mouse over it. So that highlighted text there is the mouse. So you can see that, let's say I've put my mouse there. When you first browse to a page, it will appear like this, even if this image link isn't broken. But then it takes time to download the image and put it in this slot. If you've got fast internet, you might not even notice that. But some web pages where there's lots of images, you might notice it because you've got lots and lots. I don't know if you ever go on like a really long Imager album where you might have lots of images that aren't loaded and they kind of pop in as they load. So imagine that you're reading through this, you think, oh, I'll click on this link. You put your cursor there and you click, and then suddenly that image loads. And then where my mouse was here, but now this image is loaded, it's moved the location of the 4. Right? That's irritating, especially if you click and then end up clicking on a different link. That's like even more, that's the most irritating thing potentially ever done. But there's a way around it. There's quite an easy way around it where you define a width and a height. So we do width. I think this is probably about 200 pixels. And then height is, I don't know, let's say 150. I don't, if the aspect ratio is wrong, I don't really care. Okay, aspect ratio is wrong, but doesn't matter. I'm illustrating a point. Now if I do this, the browser knows the width and the height of this image, so it's automatically given it that size. So now if we look at the number 4, it's in the same place. So you don't have that behavior of the page like everything juggling around as you're loading your images. So there's some basic tags. There are things like tables and lists, which are things that you'll need to use and know about, but I'm not going to go into those right now. What I'm going to talk about for the rest of the only other tag I'm introducing is going to be the div. And the div is a way of separating out or sectioning off your web page. Think about it like a container. It's incredibly useful. I would say everything on your web page should be in a div of some kind. So let's imagine that the title and the paragraph we want to be an introduction. So we'll make a div, a container, and we're going to give it an ID of intro. And I'm going to close it down here. Div. And I'm going to space these in a bit. Do you know what? I mean, it's up to you if you want to tab or space them however you want to do. Well, anyway, you can, if you want, indent this. It makes it a bit easier to read. This probably isn't a fantastic text editor. It's pretty good, but there are limitations of what we're doing here. So I've got my div intro there, and then the rest, let's call it div ID equals main text. I'm just going to tab this and close the div here. So this is now all in intro, and this is all in main text. And this attribute here, ID, is a unique identifier for an element. So I've got this div should be the only thing on my page called intro. And that allows me to select it using CSS and other things. I could quite as easily I could give this link an ID or this paragraph an ID. Yeah, you can do that. I could have given this image an ID, and instead of putting this style here, I could have done it in my CSS if I wanted to. So we need to look at CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. And how it works is that you will define a set of rules here using CSS selectors and assign styles to these things. The reason it's called cascading is because it will go through, it will look at an element, so it might look at this paragraph, and the browser will say, right, what element is it? Okay, it's a P element. Let's look in the CSS and look if there are any rules for paragraphs. It will look at that rule and it will apply it. And then it will say, right, this paragraph is inside this div element. Are there any rules for divs? Okay, there are. We'll apply those styles. The div has an ID of intro. Is there any rule for this specific intro text? If it finds it, it will add that to it. And it will, so that's this cascading idea. I'll show you something at the end that will help you figure out how it decides what to style things. So first, let's first start with an element selector. So let's say we want all our paragraphs to be the same color. So I start with my selector here, which when I'm doing an element is just the element it's called. And I can do color equals red. And it's turned everything that's in a paragraph to red. Notice the link hasn't changed color because it's not in a paragraph. If I change this to div, you might not be able to see the red change because I visited it, but no, don't worry. Okay, so everything in P is red. Let's say I want the intro to be centered or right aligned, let's say. So I can do what's called an ID selector. So ID, I start with a number sign and I'd say intro text align line center Okay, and it's just centered this intro. So we won't worry too much about changing this. Well, what we could do, we should, if we want it left aligned, we should define this in the CSS. So we want main text align left. We won't see that, but that will happen. So the other thing we can do is the image. There's something called a class. So classes allow like the combination of selectors, which is quite nice. So if I do class equals, I'm going to call this float right, and then I want to do image. I can do image.float right. Actually, let's not do camel case. We'll and then float, if this works. I always forget these ones. There. So it's looking at image dot float right, so the class float right, and it's making it float to the right. And we could have another class that's float left, and we could do image.float left and style it in here. And so that's how this all works. So yeah, so I'm wondering if I can. That's the basics, and I think that's a good introduction to get you started. Hopefully you've got all these ideas now, and you can go away, and if you want to do something more complicated, you know where to start, and it'll give you a start. The other thing I want to show you is more tools, developer tools, elements. Right. Let's click here. I want to go inside output container. This is a little bit more complicated because of how I'm doing it. Result div. Right. It's going to be inside this iframe. Right. Okay, so what we're seeing here now is this is our HTML, and if I click on this, what this is going to show you, so this is, I'm highlighting this, you can't see it really there. Change view, let's just get the output. Right. So this is HTML, this is the developer tools in Chrome, and it's really good. Like really useful for this kind of stuff. It's helped me learn a lot of this. So this is this image, okay? It'll be a bit simpler in your website because this is inside like an iframe inside a bunch of stuff, so don't worry too much. On the right, what we're seeing is how this got the styling, and it got image.float right is where it got its styling. What about if we click on this paragraph? Well, this paragraph got it from P, color red, which is the one we did. Yeah, so that's where that got that one from. Then if we click the div, intro center. So this is our intro has got the center, which we gave it. So this one, I think because it's left. Some of these, again, I probably picked a bad example doing it in here because it's going to make things a bit different. Let's just use this example. So the paragraph, it's got two rules we gave it from style. This is the CSS that we edited, is the one that's called style. It's got the paragraph color red. It's also got inherited from div intro text align center, and that's what's been applied. Yeah, so you can use this to have a look and see where. And it tells you exactly where it came from as well. So it will tell you what CSS file it got that from, which is like incredibly useful, especially when you start using, in my course, we're using ASP.NET, and it makes a lot of CSS files for you. It might not be obvious where all the styles are coming from. You might be like, oh God, where does that happen? So yeah. Hopefully that was clear. All I wanted to show you is that there are these tools, they exist, and they're good. yeah, they also help you do things like padding, and these are padding and border styles you can put in here and change that, how that looks. So that's it for this. If you want to see more of these videos, subscribe to me on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Dr. Sean Walton. If you have any questions, any requests for videos, let me know. Thank you for watching.